I never thought I'd be writing this story because it's not my story to tell. It's my sister's, but she's begged me to do it. She says that writing it down in her journal just isn't enough anymore, and that she needs the entire world to know what happened to her. So here we go. My sister is only a year younger than me, and she's always been the wild one. When we were kids, she was a daredevil. She would jump off of things without even thinking about it. That's why it wasn't a surprise when she became an explorer. She's currently mapping out some cave system in Borneo. We haven't spoken in months. But I get the occasional email from her, and they always filled with exciting discoveries or hilarious stories. So imagine my surprise when I get an email from her that says, "Help," all caps, no exclamation points, no jokes, no discoveries, just help. Of course, I called her right away, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message and then I waited, but it took 3 days for her to get back to me. And when she finally did call, she didn't sound like herself. Her voice was strained and shaky, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. She said that she needed me to come to Borneo immediately, that it was an emergency. I tried to ask questions, but all she kept saying was, "You have to come here. You have to." And then she hung up before I could say anything else. I spent the next few days trying to get into contact with her again, but she didn't answer any of my calls or emails. I was worried, really worried. But her boss told me that she hadn't shown up for work in several days. But he hadn't heard from her either. He told me where she was staying in the jungle, and I booked a flight there. It was only after I arrived in Borneo that she called me again. She sounded better now, more like herself, but still strained. She told me that she was too far into the jungle to come out and meet me, so I hired a guide and we set off to find her. The journey through the jungle was hard. We had to walk over fallen trees and around sinkholes, and there were biting insects everywhere. But the deeper we went, the quieter it got. The chirping of birds faded away, and then so did the buzzing of the insects. The only sounds were our own footsteps and breathing. We found her tent set up beside a dry riverbed. But when I knocked on the tent to let her know I was there, she didn't answer. I don't know how long I stood there knocking and calling for her, but eventually I just started crying. I ripped open the tent and crawled inside. She wasn't there. Then I saw it. On the ground in front of the tent lay a pile of clothes. They were my sister's. Soon as I touched them, I knew she hadn't been there for days. They were stiff and cold. As the sun began to set, I realized that I was completely alone in the middle of the jungle, with no reception on my phone and no idea where my sister could be. Suddenly, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around and almost screamed. There was a local worker standing behind me with a flashlight. He told me that he'd been looking for me and that he was taking me back to the village. But when I told him that my sister was missing, he said, "She's gone. She's been gone for days." I must have looked confused because he explained. She wanted to explore farther into the caves, past the part where we've mapped. She came to me yesterday and asked if I could take her. She said that she had to do this alone, that none of you would understand. She said that she would be fine, but that I should keep the entrance to the caves covered. She said that she'll be back before we leave. At first I thought that maybe he was lying to me, that he knew something else and was hiding it. But his face was full of sadness. He wasn't hiding anything. My sister had vanished. When we got back to the village, I posted on social media asking people to help me find her. Within a few hours, the post had thousands of likes and shares, and someone had even tagged the police. But by the time they got there, my sister was gone. She had vanished without a trace. Days turned into weeks and the searchers gave up, but I stayed in Borneo. I searched every cave and crevice, every inch of that jungle. I called out my sister's name until my throat was hoarse. I looked for her everywhere except the one place that she would have gone. That was the one thing that made no sense to me. My sister had been obsessed with these caves for years. She had maps covering her bedroom walls at home. She spent every waking moment planning her expedition. And when she finally went missing, the last place anyone saw her was at the caves. But I couldn't bring myself to go there, not until now. The guides told me that the cave entrance was too dangerous to go through. They said that there were rocks that frequently fell from the ceiling, and that there was no way that anyone could survive going through there. But they also told me that my sister had insisted that they leave the entrance clear. She must have known that no one would come after her. She wanted to be found, so I went there. The entrance was a gaping hole in the side of the mountain, and jagged rocks jutted out like broken teeth. A shiver ran down my spine as I walked toward it. What if the guide was right? What if I never came back? How would anybody find me then? But then I saw something. Someone had recently carved new markings into one of the rocks. I walked closer, and my breath caught in my throat. It was my sister's handwriting. She had been here recently, could feel it. But how could this be possible? Hadn't she been missing for weeks? I didn't even stop to think about it. I squeezed through the opening and crawled as far as I could go. Rocks scraped against my arms and legs, but I didn't care. I pushed forward, driven by the need to find my sister. Then I saw another carving. This one had a strange symbol I didn't recognize, followed by a series of dots. My sister had been keeping a log, recording the distance she traveled each day. I found another carving, and then another. Each one took me deeper and deeper into the earth. Suddenly, the tunnel opened up into a vast cavern. The air was stale and cold, and a single beam of sunlight cut through the darkness. I squinted, trying to see what was in the middle of the cavern, and then I saw her. She was sitting cross-legged on the ground with her back against a rock. Her head was bent and her shoulders were shaking. Was she alive? I don't know how long I stood there watching her, afraid to make a sound. But then she straightened up and turned around. She looked at me and I could see that she was crying. She scrambled to her feet and ran toward me. But when she got close, I could see that her skin was gray and her eyes were blank. She looked at me and then she spoke. Her voice wasn't her voice. It was raspy and inhuman. She said, "You shouldn't be here." And then she stared at me. She stared at me for what felt like an eternity. And then she smiled. She smiled and her teeth were long and sharp. She looked at me for a few seconds longer, and then she lunged.